This is the firing pin and spring and everything from the Ruger M77 Mark II. I'm actually going to be replacing this with a Wolf Blitz Chanel striker spring. This is a 24-pound one for the Ruger M77. This is the special tool for doing this. I mean, it's really just a spring compressor is what it boils down to. It will do a Remington or Ruger. Your firing pin set up there. Different threads, and these are actually the threads that go on your firing pin lug, on your bolt lug there. Recommend if you use anything like this to lube your threads pretty good. I'm using frog lube here, and I've lubed the threads here on the compressor here. Always a good idea to do that. Now the insides of these, this hardware here, they have milled them to match the firing pin. Well, it doesn't necessarily match it, it's just got a recess that'll allow that firing pin to go up in there to where it doesn't put the pressure on the firing pin, it puts the pressure down here on your spring seat. And when you thread this in, you want to make sure you get it threaded in a good bit so you don't have problems either tearing the threads out of here or off of your gun hardware. Most likely it'll be tearing the threads out of here because this is aluminum. If you look here, I'm just doing this by hand. And this tool's got in the bottom of it, it's got a couple of places for countersunk screws to go in, like sheetrock screws or something, to where you could mount it somewhere if you wanted to. I don't really have any reason to mount it, so I'm just going to do it by hand. If you'll notice here, I'm pressing this out here. And once we get it so far, alright, we moved over here to get a little bit better leverage. This is, as you'll see here, we have the tail of our firing pin and everything there. It is in our tool, and firing pin goes deep down inside of this part of our compression device. This threads down in there. Makes it good. You want to get it run in a few good threads, and then you're going to run this down. And you can see I'm just doing this by hand. Just tighten it up. It's going to press this all the way out to here. And what we want to do, angle it a little bit. And I've already busted this loose. I had a hell of a time getting it. I'll tell you right now that this pin here is a nuisance. It can be removed. If you need to, you can push this part of this retainer. You push it in. Be careful not to scratch this. And this unit, you can twist a little bit and it'll come right out. There's a spring in there also. But I was able to do it without that. And basically what I'm doing is you're going to tap this out. And if you have any question about how hard you're having to tap, if you're tapping hard enough that this thing's moving, first thing you can do is kind of tap at an angle. The other thing you might need to look into doing is support this out here. Get some support underneath it. That's what I ended up having to do. And that way you're not putting so much stress right here on this is aluminum, and you don't want to bend your firing pin and everything. And so just make sure that you take the time to support everything properly. And I'll go ahead and turn this. You can see right here, firing pin, or not firing pin, good lord, your retainer pin sticking out there. You may be able to go ahead and pull that on. Once you get it broke loose, it'll come right on out. It's just that initial getting the thing broken loose. go. And that's the pin there. Okay, now, once you get it to there, I want you to pay attention to how long this spring is. This is the factory Ruger M77 spring. Now, what I'm doing, you want to keep this threaded in there and start loosening everything. And I put a little bit of lube here because this spins. This actually becomes a bearing surface. You want to lube your threads, lube the threads here on your compression tool. All different things. And I'll tell you something that I ended up doing. I tightened this vise up trying to keep this from moving. Now I've ended up collapsing the threads on this tool just a little bit right here. And so what I'm going to have to do is get a tap that is the same threads as this Ruger bolt piece, so I can tap that out. Lesson learned. Still works, still hand tight, but you know, there you go. Now once you've loosened that a little bit, what that's going to do is, you don't want to loosen it all the way. You just want to bring some of your tension off, and you can see right here what that's done is that's pushed this off of there. It pulled the firing pin all the way out of there. Now the only reason it did that is because it was already loosened beforehand. What I had to do initially to get it off of there was I had to take a brass hammer, nylon, whatever, brass, and right here, this is the bearing surface that actually mates up with your sear. You may have to do a little bit of polishing whenever you're done, but I just hammered this and didn't have to hit it too hard, but continued to hammer that until this came loose. And this is what that pin went through, and it just holds it onto your firing pin. It's just, you know, kind of a slip fit in there, but nothing that, you know, that's real hard to overcome. And so then you can go ahead and loosen this out, and you can see the firing pin going down there. And we're going to keep on rolling this out. Now, what was amazing to me is how long this spring is. You can see now the tool there, I'm almost through the threads there, and it's going to take all of that spring there and keep on loosening. Now you want to make sure to be careful whenever you get there. I actually ended up having to loosen this a little bit to relieve the last little bit of pressure, and you're still going to have some pressure when you get to the end of these threads, see? But go ahead and do that. Pull your firing pin, get your spring, and then if you want to, you can go ahead and pull this out and make sure everything's in good shape, nothing got marred up. But you see a little bit of metal there. That's actually aluminum from this. But anyways, that's the parts, and you can see here how whenever I pull this out of here, that's the firing pin. It fits down inside of there. So that's that. And now what we're going to do is put a new spring on, and it'll be just the opposite. We'll just go back in the opposite way. I'll have that for you in a minute. Alright, here's my two springs. The shorter one, it's actually a little bit smaller, it's the factory, and the longer one is the aftermarket one that I'm going with. It's a Wolf spring, it's supposed to increase reliability on it, have a little bit better spring rate, and that's that. So now what we're going to do to reinstall is go ahead and I recommend putting a little bit of lube on your threads here. There we go. It's not necessary, but again, just want to make sure. I'm kind of having to cut some threads here since I crushed in my tool. Alright, now I've got that in enough turns that I feel comfortable with that, you know, not tearing my threads out. We'll go ahead here. I'm going to put a little bit of grease right there. A little bit of grease. That's just white lithium grease, spray grease. Doesn't really matter what you use, I mean. Alright. Run our spring in there. Now this is going to be a little bit different because this spring is even longer. And it is a little bit bigger diameter. So it just barely fits in there. So I'm just pushing this by hand. Right in. Whenever you start to twist this, you want to make sure to keep positive pressure this way until you get, you know, a good 2-3 turns there. That way, because if you stop and you've only got it just barely started, you're going to rip out the first run of threads in this tool. And then you're in a bad spot, in a tight spot, as George Clooney says. Not necessarily the fan of his politics, but some of his characters and his acting in his movies have been pretty funny. I can appreciate that. Set that aside from someone's politics. But anyways, that's the idea here. You just run this all the way up. And let me step over here where maybe I'm not in the light so bad. Try and get 2 hands on it. I'm going to go ahead and run this in a thread or 2 more now to make sure that the air compressor comes on when it shouldn't. That way you make sure that you've got enough thread here to hold the extra pressure that you're getting as you tighten this. You can see the firing pin coming up here right now. Getting full compression here on our spring. I'm going to turn that. Go. Make sure everything's clear and clean. You see how this is going on here. And notice I've got a brass hammer here, but I'm even going to use the side of it just to keep from possibly marring. Now you can look down in there into the hole. See what kind of alignment you've got. I'm using a tapered little punch here, scribe. And if you use one that's tapered, as you run it in there, it'll help align itself there. And you can also use that to turn it. Got a different jacking setup here. Have to give me a little bit stronger punch. And there we go, finally. And I'll show you here what I've got for my jack setup. Actually, if you watch here, I'll turn this. This is a block of poly that you've seen me use a lot. That's just something soft to go underneath there. That's actually a wrist pin from Acura Integra. And then this is just a piece of all thread. And I've got a base welded on. This was used for actual engine stand that I ran through the transmission bell housing bolt area. And this right here is just another nut that I can use, happens to fit over it. I can use it as a jack shaft to get my elevation. Now I've marred up the pin a little bit trying to get that in there, so what I'll do is I'll clean that off real good and then I'll put some bluing back on it. Check everything out. And now that we're to this point, what I'll do is I'm going to turn that there, make sure that we're not sticking out too far on this side and we're looking good. And now We will loosen that up. Now, something I want to show you. Watch this right here. See how our firing pin retainer is coming in, and it just stops. Alright. For there, this clip right here is holding it. So I recommend you back off just a little bit. I've got maybe an 1/8 of an inch there. And then right here, just tap it. And that taps it past there. And you may have to loosen it a little bit and tap it some more. There you go. There it goes. And it's in now. And keep on loosening. Now, loose there. We will unthread this. And again, like I said, this wasn't always so tight here on the threads, but I've collapsed that down. And there is our new Wolf spring and Ruger M77 firing pin bolt setup. I'm going to throw this in the ultrasonic cleaner now, clean everything up, polish any marred areas, and get this ready to go back together. For the extractor, to remove it, what we want to do is take this and we're going to rotate this extractor, the whole unit, and we're going to rotate it down towards the bottom, which will actually be clockwise if you're looking down the board, or from if you would be holding the gun like you were shooting it. We're going to turn this, and you can grab it right here where it reaches, and you'll watch right here, this is going to angle up as I twist it. See how now it's kind of angled up? Once you get it up there, that's going to get that part of the extractor out of that groove. And then now we can push from back here and drop it. And drop it. But anyways, there's that. And you'll see here, just got a little clip there. And that clip hooks right in there. That's your extractor. Now that clip will just come off of there, and that's your disassembly. You're done there. Now to reinstall, it's just the opposite of the install. But if you've got any issues with it, I'll show you a little trick here. You can take it and get it started. Alright. My hands are real slick from all the slipstream and frog lube on here. Slipping out of my hand. I'm gonna have to clean off all the lube here and get back to you. Alright. I'm gonna put back together, get your clip indexed properly, have you set this down on top of there. Make sure it's all lined up. And get it where you're just right there, almost touching. Get your pliers, and you want to be careful not to mar. All you're trying to do is squeeze on the clip itself. You're squeezing the clip together. You got to put positive pressure here. You got to squeeze it together. Check both sides, make sure they're in, and just tap. What you're actually doing is you're tapping on the front of this. Now we're in there into the extractor, and you've got to get this extractor where it's lifted up so it can go back over there and go into its little home. So find you something that won't mar it, like that piece of plastic there. I'm just moving a little bit at a time here. Little bit at a time. I'm trying not to go too far. I don't want to press too hard. There we go. I just pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled and pushed down until I got it to go up there. You see where it's bent there. Now that actually popped right in. So what I can do is I'm just going to spin it counterclockwise, and it's going to fit. It'll fit right down into the groove. There we go. And now that extractor is back together. Now, to put our firing pin and everything back in, what you've got to do is you've got to, if you took it all the way down and you don't have this pin through here, through your takedown hole, you've got to compress this. This has to be compressed against, your threads there. It's compressing your spring. If you've got the tool that you've already seen in the video, all you have to do is thread this into that tool and just compress it until this hole shows, and you can see where I've got my punch pushed through there. It's gonna hold right there, and you're just basically keeping that spring compressed. Now what you're going to do is just, doesn't really matter the indexing, you're just going to run this in there and just start tightening. When you do this, you want to make sure not to let your punch fall out. If you've got an actual punch or something decent, you can use it to twist by. If you feel any resistance, just stop, just like I say in all my videos. Stop and just check it out, see what's going on, reverse it. Alright, you're going to come on around, and this right here is what you're watching. Come on around, you're going to run it on down, right there, and we're going to stop right there. You see the notch there? That's the cocking notch. And now I'm going to back this off. And now this is cocked. So the bolt is back together, and I appreciate you watching this. You can watch the video on the Ruger M77 to see the final of this going back in and the trigger job and everything. I just wanted to show the bolt disassembly and assembly separate, just like I did on the Savage, and I'm going to start trying to do stuff like that on these. Have a little separate area so you guys don't have to watch a 30-minute to an hour-long video to get one thing. So I'm going to try and section it out. If there's anything that might be interesting or something that you need to know, I'll try and do a separate outtake from it and do it as a separate video. Appreciate you watching.